Hi, boys and girls. It's time for another story. I hope you had a good week. My story today actually took place when my children were little. We had moved to Oregon, and we moved to Eastern Oregon. And we had lived in a house in town, and we had a little yard. And we thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice to have a place in the country where our kids could play? They would have a nice place to be. So we started looking around for a place like that. And we found a big old Victorian house with a round tower on the top of it. And it had a big, beautiful porch that ran around the front. And it had a yard. And behind it was just fields. And beyond the fields was a wonderful little creek. And there was a dirt gravel road that ran in front of it. And we thought this would be a fabulous place. And the price was wonderful too. Well, we finally were able to rent that house. And the people that owned it were farmers, and they raised wheat in the field behind our house. Well, the house sat kind of down in a little valley, a little gully, and the main road ran this way by the side of the house, but it was a long ways down. And then there was that dirt road that I talked to you about that came down the hill and went by our house. Well, behind the house, there was a path that maybe was 10 feet wide at the most. And then there was a fence, and there was a ditch that ran along there, and there were some trees that ran. Well, our house did not have a laundry room in the main part of the house. There were 2 stories that went up above that porch, but the basement, you went down the hill this way, and there was a path we could walk down. And when you went around the edge of the house, there was where the basement was. The basement door was there, and there was windows along that. And that's where the laundry was. That was fine. I didn't mind hauling my laundry down there. There was no staircase from the inside of the house down to that laundry room. Well, my children were little. I think our oldest was in 2nd grade, and our middle son was in 1st grade, and our daughter hadn't started school yet. So they were all pretty little, but they loved it there. They could ride their tricycles and their bicycles down that hill. There was the bank that came down from the other road. They made themselves a dirt road, and they would ride in the wagon down that. It was a perfect place for kids to play. Well, among other things, when we rented the house came with a cat. It was an outdoor cat, but we'd never had a pet before and thought this was wonderful. We had a cat. Well, I worked at the hospital in town, and I worked the evening shift. So Cal, my husband, would be home, and he would take care of the kids till I got home. Well, we had talked about maybe having a dog someday. And I said, well, that'd be fine. I just don't want a pet in the house. Well, one night I came home and everybody was in bed. And in our living room, there stood a great big wood stove. And it heated the whole house. And it had a big window in the front of it. So when I came into the living room, the fire was flickering in the window of the stove. And right in front of the door of the stove, there was a little box. And inside of that box was a little black puppy. He had slick little hair, and he looked like maybe he was a black lab. And on the front of that box, there was a note to Mommy, and it said, "My name is Little Bear. I hope you like me." Well, what could Mommy say? So Little Bear became a permanent part of our family. And he was an interesting little dog. And I may tell you stories about him later. But he was there, and he would play with the kids all the time outside. But when I had to go down to the laundry, I couldn't see the kids playing from there. And I didn't really like not to know where my children were. So when I'd go to do the laundry, I would bring them downstairs, and they would play in the basement. It was just one huge room. But of course, it takes a while to do the laundry, and they would get bored. Well, when fall came, the people that owned the land where our house sat, they farmed, and the landlord would come down and she would ask if she could take my little ones in her combine. And oh, did the kids ever like that? That was wonderful. And then when it got the time when the truck had to come out and they would pour the grain in it, she would drive the truck while her husband drove the combine, and she would take my three little ones with her. And while she would have to sit and wait for the combine to go around the field to empty into the back of the truck, she would tell my kids stories, and they all loved it. Well, one afternoon, when fall came around, all the wheat had been harvested, and they put cows out into the field behind our house. Well, that was all right with me. And there was a fence that went between that 10 feet from the house to this fence. There was a fence that went along there, and there was some little older trees that were along there. And we would go down, we would look at the cows and stuff. The kids liked them, and I liked them, and everything was great. Until one afternoon, while we were downstairs, I had gotten an idea that maybe if I brought Brooks down to read to the kids while the clothes were drying or they were washing, I could read them stories. And so I had gotten the series of books by Laura Ingalls Wilder. You know, Little House on the Prairie, Little House in the Big Woods, those books. And while I was busy getting things taken care of down there, while the washer was washing and the dryer was drying, I would read them stories. Well, one afternoon they were sitting down there, and it was cool in there because it was hot there. And I looked up from the book, and there weren't just cows out on the other side of that little flimsy wire fence that had its posts weren't very sturdy. It needed to be replaced. On the other side of that fence stood a bunch of cows under the shade of those trees. But also, there was a big Brahma bull. that bull was huge. Brahma bulls are one of the biggest bulls there are. And he was big and brown, and they have horns, and they have a big hump on their back. And I was afraid of that big bull. I looked out the window and I saw him out there, and I told the kids, "Get away from the window." And I read stories, and I read stories, and I read stories, because there was no way to get upstairs in the house except to go out the door right in front of where the bull was and go up the hill. And all that would be between me and my 3 kids was that flimsy little fence. So we waited and we waited and we waited. And finally, the bull and all the cows went way far away to the other side of the field. And as quick as we could, we gathered up our clothes, gathered up the baskets, and we ran up that path before the bull would come back. I thought, this isn't safe. But I had to wash clothes. And I was afraid that because my kids were so young, just to leave them inside the house or to let them play outside. What if the bull saw them and that they got mad? He got mad at them, and he pushed through that fence. So when I had to go do laundry, I would look out the window. Was there any bull out there today? And if I didn't see the bull, then I would gather up the kids and gather up the laundry, and we would go down and we would stay till I got the laundry done. And if the bull was there, we would read even longer. We got a lot of reading done. Well, I never thought about calling the landlord and telling her that I was afraid of the bull and that the fence wasn't in good repair. I didn't think about that. I also didn't know that the bull didn't belong to them. Well, it wasn't too long after that that there was an afternoon when I was in our bedroom. And I told you that this house that we lived in was very old. And the windows in the bedrooms downstairs were very low, especially mine. My husband and I's window faced the road, and it was just a little ways off the ground that window sat. And it was big and wide, and it was tall. Well, I liked sunshine, so I always opened all the curtains. And I had pulled open those curtains, and I was changing the sheets on my bed. And I put away laundry that was there, and I was cleaning up. Then something caught my attention out of the side of my eye. And I looked at the window, and there was a little sidewalk that ran from our porch down to where we parked our car on our driveway. And there were 2 big round bushes. They were evergreen bushes, and I kind of liked the smell of them. And they stood on each side of that walk. Well, one of those bushes was doing something very odd. Bushes don't generally do anything, do they? Well, this bush was going swish, 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 back and forth. But I couldn't see what was on the other side of it. I thought, what is behind the bush? Now I was afraid. And I remember asking Jesus, whatever's out there, protect us from it. I didn't know if my doors were locked. I couldn't remember. And I stood there and I kept watching, and it didn't stop. Swish, 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 back and forth it went. It was big and it was pretty tall. Finally, branches started falling off of it, and they were laying all on the ground. And then I could see what was behind the bush. Behind that bush stood that big brown Brahma bull. And for some reason, he was mad, and he didn't like that bush. And you know, when bulls get mad, they take their hooves and they go with their feet back and forth, and they put their head down. And do you know that Brahma bull had been sticking his head into that bush with his horns sticking up, and it would go in the bush and he would swish his head back and forth. He was so mad at that, he was going to kill that bush. Well, I thought, oh my, oh, I'm so thankful that my kids are in the house. Well, they weren't downstairs with me, they were upstairs, so I knew they were safe. But I kept watching from the side by the curtain. I didn't want that bull to see me. I thought, what if he decides to charge me through the window? He wouldn't know there was glass there, and he was so strong he could go right straight through it. And I thought, what if he goes up on the porch? What if the door isn't shut? What if the screen door is the only thing that's there? I couldn't remember if the door was shut. When it was hot, we didn't have air conditioning. We'd leave the door open, and the screen door would keep the flies out. But a screen door wouldn't keep a Brahma bull out. I thought, what am I going to do? He destroyed one bush almost to the ground. Was he going to destroy the other one? Was he going to come in the house? Who do you go to when you don't know what to do, boys and girls? Do you know the best place to go? The best place is to go to Jesus. And that's what I did. He's our best friend. I said, help me think of what I should do. I didn't want that bull out there when my husband got home. I didn't want him to hurt him. So I prayed. I talked to Jesus. And that's what prayer is talking to Jesus. And I told him, I don't know what to do about this bull. Help me think of what to do. Don't let him come through the window. Don't let him get up on the porch. Don't let him hurt us, please. Well, you remember that each of us have a guardian angel. And I was very thankful for those angels. And then, sometimes when you get scared, you don't think of the most simple solution. But I think that Jesus sent into my mind an answer. I snuck because I didn't want that bull to hear my feet walking on our floors. I went to where the telephone was, and I dialed the landlady's number, and she answered. I was so glad she was home, and that's what I told her. Oh, I'm so glad you're home. I'm in trouble. You know that Brahma bull that's you guys' bull that's back in the backfield? And she said, "Oh, that's not our bull. That belongs to one of the neighbors. He just rents the place to put his bull. What's the matter?" And I said, "The bull is in the front yard. He somehow got out of the field and he's totally destroyed one of the bushes. And he's out there mad. He's pawing the ground and he has his head down and he's snorting. I'm afraid." She said, "Oh, no." Well, she loved my kids too. She said, "I'll call the neighbor. I'll send him down to get him." So from my vantage point, I watched the bull. And bulls, they make bad noises when they're mad. They go, "Mmm, mmm, mmm." He'd put his head down and his horns were facing at me. It was scary. Well, it wasn't too very long till the farmer came, and it took him a while, but they managed to get that bull up into their trailer and they hauled him away. And you know, the landlady never allowed him to put the bull in the fence behind her house anymore. I think that God takes care of us in situations that we don't even know are going to happen. God is so good. Thank you so much for listening to the story about the Brahma bull today. Remember to talk to Jesus if you ever get into trouble. Thank you. Have a good day. We'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.